Hello, our listeners. Welcome to the Washington at the podcast. We have today very important Syria expert, Nicholas Heras. Heras is a fellow at the Center for a New American Security in Washington, D.C. think tank, working in the Middle East Security Program. He is also a senior analyst at the Jamestown Foundation, another think tank in Washington, D.C. Nicholas also tweets at Nicholas A. Heras, which we will be linking it to on our Twitter account. Welcome to the Ahval podcast, Nicholas.
Thank you for having me today.
Your writings and your tweets are very valuable. You are one of those sources I turn to when I see something happening, especially something is happening in Syria, which happens a lot. Just today, I saw you have a new piece out at the Foreign Affairs. It's very useful. We are going to link to this piece as well. It is titled, "If Trump wants to get out of Syria, he should do a deal with Russia." This is co-authored with Ian Goldenberg. Let me ask my first question. John Bolton was in Turkey just yesterday, January 8th, and he could not meet with Turkish President Erdoğan. After a day of this visit, which he met with Erdoğan's spokesperson, Ibrahim Kalın, what is your view? What did Bolton achieve in Turkey?
Well, thank you again for having me. And I'd say that, John Bolton really did stir up a hornet's nest when he went to Turkey. Fundamentally, there's a disconnect between what President Trump was promised, purportedly, by President Erdoğan, and what Turkey is actually willing to do in Syria. Trump, for all his bravado, really does not want to have to be in Syria. But he also doesn't want to take flack from his political allies. And we should make no mistake. President Trump 2 weeks ago was convinced that the U.S. would be out of Syria by the end of 2018. His foreign policy advisors and his allies in Congress swooped in and tried to keep him from leaving Syria. They've succeeded in getting him to agree to slow down that process. Now, this is important background for Bolton's meeting in Turkey because there's been a lot of sort of media angst against Turkey from the United States. We've seen Lindsey Graham say it. We've seen Secretary of State Pompeo say it. We've seen other sort of national security officials off the record or anonymously say it in various different news sources in the United States. And they all say the same thing. Turkey does not have the capability to take on the counter-ISIS fight, either because Turkey doesn't have the military capabilities right now to do it, or more nefariously, because really what Turkey wants to do is go into northern eastern Syria and defeat the Syrian Democratic Forces Coalition, which is composed of a large contingent of Kurds tied to the People's Protection Units, the YPG, and essentially dismantle the entire post-ISIS stability that's being built by the U.S. military and its coalition allies. Bolton went into that meeting with Erdoğan, or the meeting that he hoped to have with Erdoğan, trying to make some strong points about what the United States would not accept from Turkey in northern eastern Syria. And Erdoğan seems to have responded with a classic move, which is, I am the master here, you're not the master here, Yankee, go home.
Okay, this was a good start. Well, isn't Erdoğan right? After what we have heard from Trump, why should Erdoğan care about John Bolton's points or listen to him?
Trump has been very, how shall we say, he's been very sort of opaque over the last week and a half, exactly how he envisions the U.S. withdrawal from Syria to be. We know he wants to leave, and he wants to leave quicker rather than slower. We know that Trump thinks that Syria is a place of sand and death for the United States. However, Trump has been very sort of unclear as to the extent to which he wants to protect the SDF and to the extent to which he wants to protect the Syrian Kurdish components within the SDF. And so this is an interesting dynamic here, because a lot of what we know about President Trump's inclinations regarding the SDF and the Syrian Kurds actually come from his political allies. I think this is an interesting point in the weeks that follow from now. What will we actually see happen on the ground? If you saw the readout from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford's meeting with Erdogan's national security advisor and his national security team in Ankara, what you saw was a recommitment to the Manbij roadmap, which is essentially U.S. Syria envoy and counter-ISIS envoy James Jeffrey's idea of trying to get the Turks to agree to a process whereby Turkish-backed Syrian actors share power with the SDF in contested areas in northern eastern Syria, like Manbij, like Tal Abyad, as two prominent examples. The U.S. military seems pretty on board with the Manbij roadmap, but if you read President Erdogan's New York Times op-ed that was published the day before John Bolton was supposed to meet with him, you saw very clearly that Erdogan has a different mindset, which is the Afrin roadmap, which is Turkey goes in, Turkey decides who rules in the areas in northern Syria, and Turkey roots out the EPG and other actors. And so this is a difference in perspectives between Washington, the national security team in Washington, and Ankara and the national security team in Ankara.
I see. In the new piece just came out, Foreign Affairs, I mentioned in the beginning, you talk about this security vacuum in northeastern Syria as the U.S. troops will leave from the region. You talk about a little bit in this. You said that Turkey's real target is the Syrian Kurds, as Turkey says YPG, as an extension of PKK. Despite all of this, do you think Turkey can fill this security vacuum and stabilize the region?
No, we need to acknowledge all the good things that Turkey has done to help the Syrian people. Turkey has very generously provided at least tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, of humanitarian assistance. In areas that are Arab majority or Turkmen majority west of the Euphrates and northwest Syria, Turkey has begun to provide municipal services and administration for people, with some uneven success when it comes to building local security through Turkey's Syrian rebel proxies. Turkey is also host to millions of Syrian refugees and provides them with the opportunity to live and work peacefully. So in that context, Turkey has been a positive actor in Syria. Where it's always been the challenge, and this is the challenge from the United States perspective, is that when it came to the counter-ISIS campaign, Turkey has been less than ideal as a partner. Famously, Turkey was very slow to close its border to foreign fighters that wanted to enter ISIS's would-be caliphate. Also famously or infamously from the U.S. military perspective, when Turkey was asked to assemble a Syrian opposition force drawn from sons of eastern Syria to go after ISIS, it couldn't do that. But the EPG and its Arab allies could, which is what led to the SDF, which is what led to the U.S. decision to back the SDF fully. And so from a U.S. military perspective, Turkey remains a valued NATO ally, and Turkey remains a key state actor in the world. There's no denying that. But in the specific context of Syria, where the United States is trying not only to just defeat ISIS, but also to build a post-ISIS stable order for administration, governance, and security. There's a lot of questions as to the extent to which Turkey can actually do that. And, I tend to agree with the U.S. military perspective on this. If we see what the force that Turkey has assembled for its purported operation in the areas east of the Euphrates, there aren't a lot of Arabs from eastern Syria there, even though there's hundreds of thousands of Arabs from eastern Syria that are refugees in Turkey. And so then you again get to the question of, okay, what is Turkey's ability to actually assemble a Syrian stabilization force that's going to be it's going to have local legitimacy, and is actually going to be able to deal with the complex socio-political dynamics that are present in northern eastern Syria?
I understand. So you, of course, are watching closely what Turkish officials have been saying, especially since yesterday, once again, after John Bolton's meetings in Ankara, Erdoğan said the operation in northeastern Syria might start anytime. And some suggest that the first target could be Tel Abyad, and there are also local elections in Turkey in March. Turkish operations happen to coincide with pre-elections in Turkey. So my question, do you think Turkish invasion of potential invasion of northeastern Syria would be justified, as YPG is known to have ties to PKK? And, some say, I've seen this coming from some Turkey experts saying that, well, this is the same thing. Israel hits Hezbollah targets in Syria, even if Hezbollah does not attack Israel from Syria. So saying that YPG is not attacking Turkey is not enough. Turkey sees them as national security threat and justified to go after them.
Now, this is a very interesting dynamic, and it's good that you're highlighting it. And I think, as with a lot of things in life, but in particular in the Syrian conflict, there's so much nuance involved that sometimes we can miss the forest for the trees. But I will try my best to navigate us through this forest. First and foremost, there's no doubt that large elements of the EPG, because not all large elements of the EPG are connected to the PYD, Democratic Union Party, politically. And then PYD started life as a branch, as a political movement that was influenced heavily by Abdullah Öcalan. There's also no doubt that the democratic society or democratic nation ideology that the SDF is trying to promote as sort of the foundational idea of the self-administration authority of northern eastern Syria is heavily influenced by Abdullah Öcalan's thinking. Now, of course, Abdullah Öcalan created the democratic society or democratic nation idea as a response to inter-ethnic violence between Kurds and Arabs that occurred in northern eastern Syria as a result of soccer riots in 2004. And so this is one of those situations where the ideology of large sections, but not all the component parts of the EPG, is tied to Abdullah Öcalan's thinking. I think where the interest in this is one of those situations where, from that perspective, you can see where Turkey would be concerned that what would happen is a safe space would be created in northern eastern Syria for PKK operatives to stay and to plan attacks across the border. And we know, and this is a fact, that early on in the Syrian conflict, there were PKK veterans, most of them Syrian PKK veterans, because the PKK had a large presence in Syria up until the Adana Accords in 1998, that there was a very strong early influence of the PKK on the formation of the EPG. What's happened in the intervening 6 or 7 years is that the EPG has become more and more a local Syrian organization. Again, still influenced by Abdullah Öcalan's teachings, but influenced by Abdullah Öcalan's teachings as derived from his later letters in response to a very distinctly Syrian situation, the Kurdish soccer riots, and how to promote interethnic harmony. So if we look at it from a 10,000 or 20,000 foot perspective, there aren't any confirmed cases of cross-border attacks that have occurred that have been launched by the PKK from SDF territory in northern and eastern Syria. That's just fact. Once you get past that fact, the other fact of the matter is that over the last 4 years, the U.S. military and other coalition militaries have worked closely with the EPG to take on ISIS. They've also influenced the EPG and tried to get the EPG to understand that if it wants to survive in a brutal region surrounded by enemies and potential predators against it, it has to be pragmatic. And it has to realize that it can't allow its areas to be a safe zone for PKK attacks into Turkey. So from that perspective, I think, in a way, Turkey is crying wolf way too much. We have the other reality, which is Turkey launched an offensive on Afrin that's resulted in the displacement of at least 100,000 people. And Kurds, ethnic Kurds, are being treated as second-class citizens. And they're losing their property, and they're losing their civil rights. And so if we look at it on balance, Turkey has fired artillery across the border into Syria. Turkey has instigated a major military operation that led to the displacement of at least 100,000 people and has taken away the civil and property rights of a particular group of people. And none of those things have been launched from Syria into Turkey.
This was a very comprehensive and very detailed comment. Thanks so much. So just to follow up on this, also there is this another discussion, and you are hearing from really reputable Turkey experts, respectful Turkey experts, that don't say that Turkey is going after Kurds or Syrian Kurds. It is YPG. Please say it YPG. It is not Kurds Turkey is going after, but when we're looking at Afrin, I think we see that not YPG, also the Kurds have been affected very badly from Afrin operation. I am not sure which side are you on this discussion. Do you think this usage of Syrian Kurds or Kurds by American officials, also mainstream international news organizations, are justified?
Well, this is another great question. And again, it's one of those questions we really do need to go into the nuances because of the complex social and political dynamics in northern eastern Syria. And it's true that the PYD and the umbrella organization Tevdem that it dominates in northern eastern Syria has had a very contentious relationship with other Kurdish parties and Syrian Kurdish activists. And there is a very tumultuous history between them within the Syrian Kurdish parties, and that is a source of tension within the governance structure of the self-administration of northern eastern Syria. That's undeniable. I think where it becomes a challenge to say just Syrian Kurds is that, Erdoğan also dislikes all the associated forces of the SDF, which includes Arabs now, that Arabs and other ethnic groups, such as Assyrian Christians or Armenian Christians or some ethnic Turkmen and others, that have fought with the SDF and cooperate with the SDF. The EPG has a large component of this force that are actually, for example, ethnic Arabs. Low-status ethnic Arab tribes that find an appeal in Abdullah Öcalan's concept of democratic society. They've been mobilized directly within the EPG. You have groups such as the Manbij Military Council, which is majority Arab, again, heavily influenced by Abdullah Öcalan's democratic society ideology. That's sort of the security front. In terms of the question of whether Turkey would be right to launch an offensive in northern and eastern Syria, we don't have very comprehensive polling data about what people's opinions are. What we have are sort of a series of trips by very reputable journalists that have gone into northern and eastern Syria and have asked this question of local people. And they've tried their best to make it a sort of representative sample. And what you find is that there's a lot of unease about a Turkish offensive from a cross-section of northern eastern Syrian society, whether it's Kurdish or Arab or other, because they see what happened in Afrin and they see the instability that's occurred in Euphrates Shield, and they wonder whether Turkey is really able to make their life better. You know, you have Kurdish opponents of the PYD, the pro-Barzani parties like the NKS, that they don't want Turkey to invade either. What they want is the Americans to force the PYD to be a better actor when it comes to power sharing and within their zone. And so this is one of those interesting dynamics where, you know, Turkey has not covered itself in glory with Afrin. Had Turkey, you know, either not done the Afrin operation, if it decided to do the Afrin operation in a better way than it did, there might be more support for what Turkey says it wants to do in northeastern Syria. But just based on the Afrin model that Erdoğan seems to want to impose on northern eastern Syria, that's not a very good alternative.
I see. Let me do one more follow-up on this. If Erdoğan follows through his promises and goes after Syrian Kurdish forces, YPG, SDF, in northern Syrian area, northeastern Syria, if it starts with Tel Abyad and might extend to other places, what will happen to those, which is estimated about 25,000 to 30,000 SDF forces? Are they going to withdraw, or do you think there is a chance of clash? What's your sense of Syrian Kurds might be doing against this operation, Turkish operation?
We have to be very clear here. There is no surrender, no retreat option for the SDF. There's no other place for them to go. And there is no other, in Afrin, the displaced ended up in, most of them in Tel Rifat. Some of the displaced ended up in the northern eastern Syria, in the Self-Administration Authority of northern eastern Syria. But there is no other place for the SDF to go. There is no surrender, no retreat. There may be a deal that can be made with Bashar al-Assad and Russia in that situation, but there is no surrender, no retreat. And this is an important dynamic here. There's a large stand-in force that has been trained by the United States and other coalition partners to fight. They've been armed by the United States and other coalition partners. They've been trained by the United States and other coalition partners. That's almost half a decade of training and arming and being prepared for the worst, mainly to fight ISIS. But if Turkey really does come into northern eastern Syria, there will be consequences for the Turkish military because it's fighting a different type of force than the mainly EPG force that have fought in Afrin that chose not to contest urban areas to protect the population. Because there was a place for people to go. There is no longer a place for people to go.
And I should remind the listeners that Turkish General Ismail Metin Temel, who was the commander of the 2nd Turkish Army in southeast of Turkey and who oversaw a Jarablus operation as well as Afrin operation, and who was also overseeing potential Manbij operation and other operation in northern Syrian northeastern Syria, resigned or relocated and demoted from his 2nd Army position due to reportedly his opposition to such operations in Manbij, and mostly the reasons just you have been elaborating here. My final question to you, Nicholas. In a big picture, I've been trying to ask this question to every expert I've been hosting here. The U.S. Strategy, on the one hand, we know that Trump administration's main target is Iran, keeps talking about Iranian influence, malign influence they talk about, and Mike Pompeo is in the region as well. What is your sense while slow down withdrawal from Syria, but at the same time talking about putting pressure on Iran, how this strategy is going to look like in next 6 months, you think?
The United States is in an awkward position in Syria if it wants to diminish Iran's influence over Syria. The major concentration of Iran's influence and power in Syria is in western Syria, where the U.S. doesn't have much leverage. It's not in northern and eastern Syria. Yes, the middle Euphrates River Valley area of Deir ez-Zor in eastern Syria on the Syrian-Iraq border is a zone that Iran would like to control because Iran believes that Iraq is essential to provide in security for Iranian territory. So if Iraq's territorial integrity is threatened by, say, the reemergence of ISIS in eastern Syria, that's bad for Iran. So Iran would like to control that strategic space. Similarly, although the U.S. military presence at Tanif along the Syrian-Jordanian border in the Syrian desert region of southeast Syria is an irritant to Iran, Iran can always maintain its land bridge to Lebanon from Abu Kamal, which is the border point between Syria and Iraq, in Deir ez-Zor, that Assad, but mainly Iranian-backed Iraqi Shia militias control, up to the city of Deir ez-Zor, across the city of Palmyra, and onward. So there isn't much more that the U.S. can really do in Syria if President Trump doesn't want to send divisions of U.S. Marines to remove Assad from power in Damascus. And so what they're left with is a macroeconomic strategy of applying intense sanctions on the Assad government to try to collapse it under Russia, and then try to force Russia to come closer to the U.S. position, which is Russia has to really work hard to remove Iranian-backed militias from Syria. But that still doesn't get at the other dynamic, which is Iran has built a pretty extensive infrastructure of missile stockpiles that it can then feed to Lebanese Hezbollah via Western Syria. Essentially what Iran has done over the course of the Syrian civil war is built extensive strategic depth for Lebanese Hezbollah via Western Syria. And that the Iranians likely will not relinquish because that provides the Iranians with an intense form of strategic deterrence on Israel. And so, the Trump team has no easy answers for that. And my concern is one way the Trump team might try to cheat on that is by giving Israel the green light to turn Syria into a free fire zone, whereby Israel bombs extensively within Western Syria to try to get at Iran, potentially launches an offensive into Israel, or even towards Damascus to remove Iran's military infrastructure, and thereby leads to a broader regional conflagration. It's a very, very difficult situation.
Got it. Thank you so much, Nicholas. This was a great conversation. We are going to put this on Twitter as soon as we are ready. I hope to have you to talk about these issues going forward again in near future. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you very much. All the best to you.